In today's video, we demonstrate how to use a C1 controller as an assistant for a C2 controller. The MECHA C2 controller is a Fanotec dedicated dual-axis controller. Its features also include a cam port to trigger camera focus and shutter release. A shutter release cable is needed to connect a camera to the MECHA C2's cam port. One C2 controller is sufficient to perform all the tasks required in a dual-axis application. However, a C2 controller can have an assistant, another controller that can be used to trigger a camera instead of using the main C2 for this purpose. In this case, the shutter release cable connects the camera to the cam port of the assistant, and there is no cable between the camera and the cam port of the main C2, as the two controllers are wirelessly connected. The assistant will receive and echo any camera trigger signal sent by the C2. Imagine a C2 controller rotating a turntable, with its assistant, a C1 controller, receiving camera trigger signals from the C2 controller and photographing an object placed on the turntable. For our demonstration, we will consider that a local network is not available and we need to use MECHA's Wi-Fi network. As you know, when set as an access point, AP, MECHA broadcasts its own Wi-Fi network, and the MECHA's user interface can be accessed using a phone or tablet, for example. Power on the C2 controller first and press the minus button when the display shows AP, STA, AP plus STA. To ensure the controller is set to AP mode. This is the main controller. Then, power on the C1 controller and, similarly, press button 1 when the LEDs appear as a splitting light to ensure this controller is also set to AP mode. The next step is to connect the C1 controller to the network of the C2 controller. This network will assign an IP address to the C1 controller. Use a phone to access the C1 user interface as usual. In the list of available networks, identify and select the C1's network. Then, enter the static IP address 192.168.8.1 in a browser address bar and access the C1 user interface. Access the configuration page. The default connection mode is STA, however, it was set to AP when the MECHA controller was powered on. Tap the Connect button at the bottom of this page. Then, select the C2's network and tap the Connect button. MECHA C1 is now connected to the C2's network. The IP address assigned to C1 is 192.168.8.100, as seen on the configuration page. The next step is to specify this IP on MECHA C2, so it recognizes MECHA C1 as its assistant. To do that, access the config menu on the C2 controller and find the plus assistant option. Press the plus button to enter edit mode and use the plus and minus buttons to change the last octet of the IP address. We will increment the value using the plus button. Keep the button pressed to speed up the adjustment. Then confirm by pressing the center button. You can use either the lower cable or the upper cable on the C2 controller to connect the controller to the rotator mounted under the turntable. When using the upper cable, ensure setting 79 in the config menu is set to rotator 1 is up. A C2 using a plus assistant is referred to as C2 plus in the supporting materials. A C2 plus commands both itself and the plus assistant simultaneously. Let's see how it works. We will run the preset Panorama Test Single 6 from the preset menu. This is a factory preset. The first trigger signal is sent by C2 and received by C1, triggering the camera. Then, the turntable is rotated 60 degrees to the second position. Here, C2 sends the second trigger signal, which is received by C1, triggering the camera again. Then, the turntable is rotated 60 degrees to the third position. Similarly, this process is repeated for the next 4 positions. If both controllers are connected to the same local network, simply specify the IP address of the C1 controller using the plus assistant option in the C2 config menu. In this case, the assistant can be set to AP plus STA or STA mode. Thank you for watching.